Hi, I'm Jeremiah. Welcome to Up at Night. This podcast is all about learning from thought leaders, academics, and professionals based on one fundamental question. What keeps you up at night? Welcome to Up at Night. I'm thrilled to be joined by Robyn Flynn from Robyn Flynn Media this week. And we're going to chat about her incredible journey from radio broadcaster to a digital marketing entrepreneur. So Robyn, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. So one thing I would like to know, because we've had the chance to work together at Polysleep on two amazing podcasts, but I want to know a little bit more about your story. What brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, so I actually wanted to work in radio. That was my main dream job, but it was because I was such a huge Habs fan. So I wanted to find a way to be paid to watch hockey. That was the goal for me. I wanted to be a professional play-by-play announcer. I used to watch hockey as a kid growing up, and it never made sense to me that it was only ever guys that did that. There were no women calling hockey games. And I would always ask my dad, like, how come there's never a girl? And he was like, well, honey, you'll have to be the first. So that was the goal from the time I was a little kid. I went in to study radio because my original goal was to be the first woman to do play-by-play. Fortunately, there have been plenty of women who have done it since then. But I did end up doing play-by-play for women's hockey, which was really cool. So I kind of fulfilled that dream job. But once I ended up in sports radio, I figured out that I really, really liked being behind a microphone and I enjoyed it. So I ended up working in radio for 10 years doing basically whatever they needed me to do. I ended up working at CJD, TSN 690, Virgin, Showm, just across the board doing a variety of things, production, on air, behind the scenes, in front of the scenes. And I really loved it. It was so much fun. I consider myself a microphone addict, if you will. But things change when you have kids, right? So that was sort of the end of the radio career, if you will, because I had a baby. I mean, the story is always the same, right? You have kids and then things just sort of shift a little bit. And, you know, the schedule I had before didn't really lend very well to being a mom.
So, you bring something that I wasn't necessarily thinking about talking right now, but tell me about that schedule. Because, it's probably been a struggle to go from that dream to making it a reality. And what were the sacrifices you had to do from a schedule perspective, from a health perspective to get there?
At the beginning, the only opportunity was morning show, which is great because that's when most people are listening. But to be on the air at 6 a.m., you need to be at the station by 4 a.m., which means you're waking up at 2:30 a.m. So that's not even morning anymore. You're waking up in the middle of the night. And it's one thing to do this once or twice, but when you're doing it 5 days a week, months on end, I did it for 2 years. That schedule is really difficult because it's really hard to have any sort of a life outside of that schedule. On the nights where there was no hockey games, I was in bed by 6:30, 7 p.m. because you got to get up at 2:30. But if there was a Habs game and I needed to watch it because you have to watch the hockey game to be able to talk about it the next morning, you're staying up late, so you have to take a nap in the afternoon. Otherwise, you're only going to have 4 hours of sleep. So having split shift sleep is really, really hard. Napping from 2 to 5 p.m. in the afternoon and then again from 10 to 2 a.m. I never knew when I was waking up if it was day or night.
Wow. And I can imagine on top of that, you need to have that prime hype level of energy. You can't be like, oh, I'm tired. I didn't sleep well. I don't feel like doing it today.
No, how often do you turn on the radio and hear somebody who sounds miserable, exhausted? No, they always have super high energy. They're happy to be there. They're helping you get your day started. And it's kind of the same thing even later in the day. I ended up doing the drive home show, and people are relying on you to tell them what happened that day. So you have to be so on top of everything that you can never really turn it off. That was one thing I really struggled with is you get vacation time, but you can't stop paying attention to what's going on in, news, pop culture. You need to constantly be informed so that when you come back, you don't have to play the catch-up game because you just don't have time for that.
And for those who's going to listen to it, I really would like to know a bit how, from a mindset perspective, becoming a mom did force you in a way to bring those changes. Because I can imagine being a real estate superstar or being in the radio industry or the showbiz industry, there's probably a moment when you have to make certain sacrifices to say, hey, you know what? I got to be there for my kid.
Yeah, especially I didn't anticipate that I would be one of those moms who didn't return to her job. Like if you had asked me before I went on maternity leave, are you coming back? 100% yes would have been my answer. But the second she was born, I couldn't imagine not being with her all the time. You know, we get a year of maternity leave in Canada, and we are so lucky. You know, I look at the US where these women get a few weeks if they're lucky. You know, I had a C-section. I would not have been ready to go back to work after a few weeks. But after a year home with my daughter, I couldn't not be home with her anymore. And the thought of, you know, dropping her off for daycare at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning and only picking her up at like 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, because that was the hours that I had, rushing to make supper and put her to bed. Like I would see her for half an hour every day. And it didn't seem sustainable. It didn't seem worth it to live life that way. At that point, what's the point of having a child? You know, you're not spending any time with them. And this is no judgment to people who have their kids in daycare full time, because you have to do what you have to do. I'm lucky that I was able to take a look at my skill set, my education, my background, and say, hey, maybe I can do something with this. Maybe I have a product. Maybe I am the product, and I can start selling that product and my expertise and my knowledge and work with other people who want to do what I used to do. And that's basically what I started doing. I didn't think I had a marketable skill set. I thought, you know, if I lose this radio job, I don't know how to do anything else. No one's going to hire me. And I had to remind myself that, no, that is a skill set. You know, being on the air gives you great communication skills. Preparing for live radio means you're able to thrive in like high pressure scenarios, high pressure environments. You can work under tight deadlines. Those are all transferable skills, especially in entrepreneurship. So I found transitioning into sort of starting my own business like not as hard as I thought it would be because I had a lot of those transferable skills. And the advantage too was that I was able to then make my own schedule so that I could spend time with my daughter. It's not uncommon for me to be taking a meeting with a client with my 2-year-old sitting on my lap. That is very normal. And I only work with people who are cool with that. You know, there's lots of people who probably wouldn't be okay with that. That's not my kind of client.
I get it. So looking at her was that little pivotal moment that was like, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it. Because a lot of people are hesitant about doing this move. And it's scary, right? You jump into the unknown, starting your own business. You don't have customers. You don't know how you're going to do your accounting, all these stuff. And looking at these two little eyes was the motivation, the source for you to do the move.
Well, I had no choice. I had to feed her. I had a mortgage to pay. I have bills to pay. So success was the only option. Failure was not an option. And that kind of drive is what keeps you up at night, right? Yeah. That's what makes you succeed because you have no other choice. And I did whatever I had to do to be able to put food on the table, to keep my kid happy, you know, I don't need to live a fancy life. I don't need to be jet setting all over the world, going to Tahiti. That's not me. As long as I can feed my family, keep a roof over our heads, and spend time with my daughter, that's what she's going to remember. She's not going to remember that I bought her the most expensive toys or that she had the fanciest brand name clothes. She's going to remember that like mom came to all my dance recitals, that mom signed me up for soccer and she was sitting on the sidelines. That's the stuff the kids remember. So that's what I'm trying to create for her. That's the kind of life that we're trying to build. And I think it's important for her too to see that, you know, women can start businesses too. Women can have successful careers, and I can do that someday because my mom did it while raising a kid. If she could do it, so could I.
And based on what you were sharing with us on TikTok, it was a hard journey. You had to go through a lot. And I would like to know if you're willing to share a bit more about that and what was that probably roller coaster of emotion you had to go through before it actually happens and the joy comes to life and you have her. What was that in the process like?
I always knew I wanted to be a mom. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. I'm the oldest of all my cousins. I was the default babysitter my entire life. I've always been good with kids. And when my husband and I met each other, that was one of the first things we discussed. You know, do we both want to have kids? Is this in the plans for us? Yes, we were on the same page. And we started trying for a child, and it didn't come as easy to us as it did for our friends. And we had been trying for several years when it was at the point where our friends were like lapping us. They were on their second kid, their third kid, you know, and we still didn't even have one. So we had to do the process of starting fertility treatments. And there are so many steps that you have to take, so many tests that you have to endure, you know, just to be able to be approved for each step. You know, okay, what's the problem and what's going to work for you? So I have polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS is what it's more commonly known as, which basically is a hormonal imbalance. It causes a lot of things, including weight gain. Most women with PCOS are overweight, and it also impacts your fertility. You don't ovulate regularly. And if you're not ovulating, you can't get pregnant. So there is medication that helps with that, and it works. The problem is my husband also has fertility issues. So when you combine the two together, it made us getting pregnant basically impossible. Like the doctor told us, the odds of us ever getting pregnant naturally were slim to none, which is devastating to hear, especially because at the time, in vitro fertilization, which was our only option, was not covered by Medicare. So we had to dip into our savings and decide if that was something we wanted to do, because there's no guarantee that it's going to work, right? So we had to dip into our savings. It cost thousands of dollars, and you don't know if it's going to work. It's painful. The tests, the procedures, everything is excruciating. I was giving myself injections 3 times a day. You know, you go for your egg retrieval surgery where they extract all the eggs. And I did that surgery without anesthesia, which is crazy because a lot of people don't realize this, but IVF is generally not allowed for women who are overweight. And that is because out-of-hospital procedures have a certain threshold for how much anesthesia they're allowed to administer in the province of Quebec. So if you are over a certain weight, they cannot administer the amount of anesthesia that you would require outside of a hospital. So I had to sign a waiver saying that I understood what I was getting into.
Oh my God.
And the only anesthesia I got was a stress ball. They gave me a stress ball to squeeze onto. And it is definitely the most excruciating, most painful thing I've ever lived through. Childbirth was easier because I had an epidural. You know, you've got medication and people helping you, but I had to just suck it up and focus on the end goal that, you know, this is going to get us our child. And even if you know there's no guarantees, you have to believe that there are. Otherwise, there's no way you can get through it. And I basically started posting about it on TikTok. And I was just looking for, you know, like a community of people who were going through what I was going through. And I ended up having a few videos go viral, a few thousand views here, then tens of thousands of views. And then I had a couple that just went into the millions, and it was crazy. And all of a sudden, I was hearing from women all over the world who were experiencing exactly what I was experiencing, that pain of wanting to be a mom and not being one. And it's a pain unlike any other, this yearning to have a child. You're a mom already and you just don't have a baby, which is a really hard place to be. But we were lucky after almost 4 years, our second embryo transfer, we got the call that it had worked and I was pregnant. And
that's amazing.
It was the best day of my life, 100%. I knew that was my baby. Like at that moment, I wasn't worried, oh, maybe I'm going to have a miscarriage. Maybe it's not going to work. I knew, I was like, nope, that's the girl. We've been waiting for her. I knew it was a girl. And I have never been more convinced in my life that she was meant to be my daughter. And she wouldn't be my daughter if we had gotten pregnant right away, if we hadn't had these challenges. So, you know, it's easy in hindsight to say everything happens for a reason. When you're going through it, it's harder to believe that. But 100%, that's how it was supposed to be.
And it's scary because, like you said, it's already hard itself. But let's be honest, in Canada right now, our healthcare system is so broken. And sometimes I'm wondering, you've been through that. What could have been different that would truly have made a difference? And, you know, let's throw it out there and hopefully someone listen to this podcast, have networks and people in the political circle that could do something about it. What would be the single most important thing they should change to support women in situations like yours or like the one you were before?
Just having dignity. At every single turn, I was being denied treatment because of my weight. I had so many doctors and nurses that were stigmatizing me because I'm an overweight woman. And there was this misconception that even when I was pregnant, they tried to diagnose me with gestational diabetes, even though I had done the test and I did not have gestational diabetes. But they said, you could stand to lose a few pounds, lay off the soda and the pizza. And they didn't even bother to ask me about what my eating habits were. They looked at me and made an assumption. And, look at my chart. I have PCOS. You should know that a lot of my weight gain is beyond my control. I don't even drink soda. I don't eat pizza. Like, that's just not me. I'm pretty active. I'm not like a gym buff or anything, but, I have a dog. We walk her several times a day. That's...
Hello.
Hang on for her to get out.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
We've been talking about her for the last 10, 15 minutes, so it's great that she shows up.
Yeah. I was stigmatized for my weight at every single stage. They tried to diagnose me with gestational diabetes, even though I took the test and didn't have it. They were telling me that I should lay off the pizza and soda without even asking me if, what my eating habits were like. So I think the thing that is missing in our healthcare system today, to answer your question, Jeremiah, is treating people with dignity. Our doctors and nurses are so burnt out that the humanity has completely left healthcare. You're just another patient that we're trying to get in and out the door as quickly as possible because there's 50 behind you waiting to be seen that day. And we're not human beings anymore. And at that point, what is the point of healthcare? You have to be thinking of people as people and not just numbers.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree. So we could call this trial and tribulation as, moment that probably really influenced you at the deepest level. How did this event transferred to your professional career? How did that impact Robyn as an entrepreneur?
Well, I definitely learned tenacity because I think someone else may have gotten that, no, you're too fat, you can't have a baby, and said, they're probably right, and just stopped right there. And that's not me. I advocated for myself. I did research and came armed with information about why I would be a good candidate for IVF. I did research online till I found a doctor who was willing to help me. Dr. Dahan, I wouldn't have my daughter without you. So huge shout out to you. But advocate for yourself. And that is something you need to do in entrepreneurship as well. One of the things I was most afraid of when I started my own business was the sales element. Because it's not just about doing the job. You have to convince people that you can do the job and get them to sign contracts with you and pay you money. And I was nervous because I thought I had no background in sales. And I found that once I started hopping on meetings, I was just myself. And everything else just sort of fell in line. I explained, here's what I can do. Here's how I can work with you. And I think we'd be a really great fit. Let's try this. And I don't know what it was, but people responded really well to that. So I was terrified that I wouldn't be a good salesperson, but things are working out. So I'm not even going to read a book on sales because I don't want to mess with the system that I've got going. And I think being tenacious, having navigated infertility, having worked really hard to, get my dream job in radio, getting up every morning at 2:30, it all came together full circle to enable me to run my own business. You have to be really, really dedicated to your vision because you don't have someone telling you what to do. You don't have a boss telling you it's time to sit down and put in the work. You're in charge. You're the boss. So you have to have a schedule. You have to be disciplined. And that can be really, really difficult for some people. If they're not being told what to do, they're not going to do it.
You're absolutely right. What would be the most important skill set to develop for someone who would like to do the jump from being employed to be an entrepreneur?
I would say organization is number one, being very, very organized. Even if you're just using, an Excel spreadsheet, a Google Sheet, whatever, have some way to track everything. Money in, expenses out, your calendar system, your to-do list every day. Just have some sort of system in place so that you can stay on top of things and you're not dropping the ball. And the other thing that I think a lot of people are very afraid of is to work on your communication skills. I remember when I was in school, no one ever wanted to give an oral presentation. When I was in university, a group project, they were like, okay, you do all the talking. And they didn't want to speak in front of the class. And that never made sense to me because I felt most comfortable speaking in front of a crowd of people. To me, that was the easy part of the project. The hard work is the actual research and prepping everything and creating your presentation. But when it came time to just stand in front of people and talk to them, that's where I felt most at ease. And I think that's something that's not very common. And that is something that you're going to have to do constantly, whether you're pitching to investors, whether you're speaking to your employees, whether you're networking with people, attending events, speakers, what have you, you're always going to have to be able to communicate. So that is a skill that I think people really should try to develop and to try to get over that fear of public speaking.
You're pretty successful for a young entrepreneur. You got a waiting list, which is awesome. And as you mentioned, I think, working with you, you've built a pretty clear system, and it's very easy as a customer to know what's next and when the project start, when the project end, what are the expected results. And I think that's what works really well, the way you work. Now, how do you scale from there? Do you have a desire to scale?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think I'd heard that like most entrepreneurs, you don't make money in your first few years. That's sort of expected. So I was kind of shocked that I turned a profit my first year. That was something everybody told me was not possible. So I took that money and invested it back into my business so that I could make even more money in my second year. And I have a desire to scale, but to an extent. I had a sort of point this year where I was deciding whether or not I should hire people to work for my team. And I had a conversation with my father about what the purpose of all of this was. He said, do you want to run a business? Do you want to have a team of people working under you? Do you want to dedicate more time to your business, which is more time away from Peyton, which is my daughter? And ultimately, no. The reason I started this business was so that I could spend more time with her, so that I had that flexibility to take her to dance class at 2:00 in the afternoon if I wanted to. So I have to keep that in mind because it's very easy to want to scale and grow and make more money. It's very attractive, right?
Of course.
Everybody wants that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that isn't a value that I hold dearest. It's not a top 5 priority for me. So for me, I'm a weird entrepreneur, I think, because I want to scale to a point where it's max capacity for me, which is why I have a wait list, because I could take on more clients now and hire help, but then that would be time away from my family. So I have to just keep in mind what my priorities are and what I'm trying to achieve. And my goal here is to have consistent income, to be able to pay for what I need. I have a very modest lifestyle. I like to hang out with my family and we do activities. As long as I can keep living the current lifestyle that I am leading, I'll be happy. Put some money away so we can retire someday. That's really the end goal for me.
There's a great lessons for many entrepreneurs here and aspiring entrepreneurs, I think, which is ultimately time is the resource you will not be able to get back, and you will exchange it. And you will exchange a lot of it at the beginning to make money, to learn, to make mistakes. And exchanging too much time for money will give you time without energy, and that's totally useless. And I think your source of energy is obviously your daughter. And I think it's a wise decision to make sure you have constantly that fuel that keeps you happy, motivated, continuously wanting to pursue what you're doing. So I think it's a very smart decision. The one last thing I would like to ask you, Robyn, is outside of Peyton, because obviously she's a great source of inspiration. Who would be your greatest source of inspiration in life?
Can I say Taylor Swift?
Well, I mean, talking about entrepreneurs, she's an amazing entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, a huge source of inspiration for me is my dad. I was very fortunate to grow up with a father who was very invested in all of our lives. I'm one of 4 kids, which is hard for a parent to devote time and attention to 4 children. And my dad was taking me to the park, at a time when dads didn't do that. Dads weren't super involved in their kids' lives. My dad has always been interested in whatever we were interested in. I liked hockey, so he took me to hockey games. My sister played musical instruments, so he bought her instruments and took her to the orchestra. He's always just pushed us to do whatever makes us happy. And it wasn't about earning the most money. It was about waking up every day and enjoying what you do, enjoying your life. And I can see that in all of my siblings. We all have passion careers and we have all been successful. I think there's this misconception in parenting that, you want your kids to make a lot of money, encourage them to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. But if your kid's not happy doing it, they're not going to have a fulfilled life. And I'm very grateful that my father encouraged us to do what makes us happy instead of just chasing after the most money possible. And I think it's evident in the fact that, I bought a house 6 doors down from my dad. He's got kids who love to stay close to him, in an era where people are cutting off their parents. You hear all the time, my adult children don't talk to me anymore. They never come visit. My dad can't get rid of us because he created such wonderful relationships with all of us. So, he's 100% one of the biggest inspirations in my life. I go to him for advice. I go to him for a joke. I go to him for help with my taxes. Literally everything under the sun. My dad is my go-to person, and I'm really, really lucky to have him.
That's amazing. It's hard nowadays, and you have to be surrounded by great people. One thing I would like to ask you is, you've been through a lot of hardship, a lot of sacrifices. And one thing I really want to try to debunk with this podcast is that it is easy to be an entrepreneur. There is some corner you can cut. And I would like to ask you, without going through everything you went through, would you be as happy, successful, and in control as you are today?
Definitely not. I mean, I don't want to say that everything awful that happened to me was a good thing, but in some ways it is, because, struggling with infertility and a variety of other things that I experienced over the years made me the person that I am today. It made me strong. It made me tenacious. And it enabled me to know what my priorities are, because I've been through the difficult times, and it really gives you some perspective, because I've had lean months as an entrepreneur where I don't have as many clients that I'm working with that month, but I've been through worse. So I have this optimistic outlook because I've always been through worse, which is helpful. And just because something is difficult doesn't mean you can't do it. There's always a way to figure something out. There's somebody you can reach out to for help. There's a resource online. There's a YouTube tutorial. There's a podcast you can listen to. There are ways to learn how to start your own business. You just have to be willing to put in the work. You can't sit back and just say, I wish I could start my own business. I wish I could travel more. I wish that I had children. You have to figure out how to achieve those goals, create a plan, and put it into place.
I couldn't agree more with what you just said. So, Robyn, thank you so much for being on the pod today. I really love the conversation we've had. You're such a source of inspiration when it comes to resilience, when it comes to tenacity. So, if people want to follow you on social media, I think your Facebook and Instagram is Robyn Lisa Flynn, right?
That's right.
You also have a lot of TikTok videos, which are super cool. I would invite everybody to go check out Robyn. And again, thank you so much for joining me on Up at Night. And I look forward to seeing you anytime soon to talk business and have a coffee.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Anytime you're by, you got my number.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you so much for being part of the Up at Night family. If you've liked what you heard today, don't forget to rate, follow, subscribe, or leave me a comment below. New episodes of Up at Night drop every week. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single episode. I'm Jeremiah Curvers. Until next time.